just a quick introduction about the different certifications which are available. IAPP is the pioneer when it comes to data privacy and data privacy certification. Just like we have ISACA for CISM and CISA, similarly IC Square for CISSP, right? So for when it comes to data privacy, IAPP is a pioneer organization, and they have three different variants. One is CIPP, which is called Certified Information Privacy Professional. In the first variant, we study the different data privacy regulations, which are the laws in the world. And so we have four sub variants when it comes to CIPP, which is CIPPE, which stands for GDPR, which is Europe. The second is CIPP Asia, and third is US, and fourth is Canada. Right, so we have four different variants, but in Infosectrain we focus on Europe, which is GDPR, because GDPR is considered as a gold standard when it comes to data privacy laws, and it is the most strictest law that is there right now. And if you have a good thorough knowledge of GDPR, it's quite easy to apply that knowledge to any other data privacy law in the world. So I can definitely say that with a lot of confidence, because this is not possible for you to study. There are more than 195 data privacy laws in the world. It's not possible for you to study each and every data privacy law, right? That's the reason, if you study the most strictest law in the world, and a law which has a history of 40 years, then most probably you're going to have a very holistic experience, right? That's the reason I always say, someone who wants to jump into data privacy career, start with CIPPE and then progress to CIPM. So CIPM is Certified Information Privacy Manager. So this is the only certification that speaks about how a data privacy professional uh, should handle the day-to-day operation in a company, right? So how to build a data privacy program from scratch, how a data protection officer should dispose their responsibility when it comes to the organization, right? So this is equivalent to your CISM and CISSP when it comes to information security. So it's a very good combination, because tomorrow what I foresee is that every organization is going to demand the CISOs to also gain expertise in data privacy, because it's a non-negotiable requirement. Now in India, it's a legal requirement, right? So all the CISOs will definitely be pushed to also understand the data privacy aspect of it, right? So it's a very good investment if you can start getting a certification in data privacy. It really helps you for the next 5 to 10 years. So the third variant is Certified Information Privacy Technologist, which is CIPT. So in this course, you're going to go a little deep in terms of the technological controls. We're going to study the different privacy threats, privacy controls, and we will study a bit of them in detail, like anonymization, pseudonymization, encryption, and what are the different privacy models, privacy harms. So all these things we are gonna, and also the technology aspect of the upcoming artificial intelligence, blockchain, and all that stuff. So how do we actually cater the technological control aspect, and also privacy by design? How do we embed privacy by design into the process and technology aspects in an organization, right? So that is the CIPT. So the fourth variant which is mentioned here is not a certification. If you finish, if you complete two certification out of the three, and CIPP is a mandatory one out of that. Between CIPM and CIPT, if you finish one more, then you can apply for FIP tag. It's a leadership accreditation when it comes to data privacy. You need to demonstrate 3 years of experience, and four people have to vouch for your endorse your experience when it comes to data privacy. So then you will be between us and any other vendor in the market. So we provide 32 hours of instructor-led training, which is a key differentiator when it comes to any other data privacy training vendor. Most of them have 12 hours of data privacy training, but where we have 32 hours. The reason for that is CAPM and CIPP are a bit of complex topic. You need to understand these elements in at a foundation level, and you need this time to actually go through these relevant reading materials, come back, brainstorm, and you will also discuss on the question and answers. So there's a lot of time required for you to get a sense of complete satisfaction that you are ready to give this exam, right? A quick 2 days, 3 days session, just 4 hours will not be sufficient for you to be well prepared. That is the reason this is a key differentiator when it comes to us with any other market player. And you always get a guaranteed low price when it comes to Infosectrain. And I'm a certified instructor with FIP, and also I'm a certified trainer with IAPP as well. So the courses the course that we offer are career oriented, and there is a mock exam included as well. Uh, Apart from that, we also do a case study approach, and we also provide templates and other useful resources part of the course. And we also take a dedicated exam strategy session, and also I'll be supporting you even after completing the course in terms of Q&A, or you have any queries. I'm always there to support you. And finally, we provide career guidance. If you want to shift your career completely into data privacy, I'm always there, shout away to help you out how to plan your next steps and how to strategize your next steps when it comes to data privacy path. All right. With the exam strategy, that will be the content for today. All right. So let me check if there was any comments. So I'm going to start with the exam strategy today. All right. So we have completed till 7 chapters, part of day one, day two. We are going to discuss three more chapters today. But how to clear this exam, which is CIPM, within 30 days, right? So the reading materials that are required for CIPM is only two options. One, you have to read the official textbook, okay, which is Privacy Program Management, third edition, and the slides which we will be discussing during our training, which is called Participants Guide. All right. So these are the only two materials which you need to refer. And the Participants Guide is a heavy summary of your textbook and other important content which is required for your exam, right? So reading this textbook is required because you need to at least read once the textbook completely, right? And it helps you to just go back whenever you make a mistake. When you do the Q&A part, just go back to certain sections and then focus on your weak areas, right? Booking an exam slot is a very very important reason, because many a times people clear it within 1.5 months to 2 months. Beyond that, they actually go into a negative zone that I suddenly forgot whatever we understood during the training. There was a big gap. Suddenly, all these things generally happen because all of us are professionals. We are occupied with personal and official work. So, generally, what I suggest to every participant who join my training is, after the third week, try to book your exam slot maybe 30 days or 40 days from that day, and give the exam then and there, right? So even before that, for example, you want to clear this exam in next 30 days. When you join my training, you can do it within 30 days. I have seen participants who have done the exam within 25 days of my training as well. So it's 100% possible. So what you need to do is what I'm going to say to you, right? So booking this exam slot is a very very important factor. So whoever has done other certification like CSSP, CISM, and CISA, they know how important is to book an exam date. That gives you a lot of focus, right? How to actually conquer such professional certification, right? So 20 days of reading the official content and textbook and 10 days of practice is more than enough. So when it comes to practice, I'll list what are the different practice resources that you need to take up. And so when you join my session, I'll be sharing the CIPM body of knowledge. So CIPM body of knowledge is nothing but a curriculum, okay? So the 10 chapters which is there in the textbook is actually segregated based on initial section of privacy program introduction, your framework and the legal and regulatory requirements, and then it goes into a privacy operation life cycle, which is assess, protect, sustain and respond, right? So this is what your curriculum is divided into. And along with that, I'll also share some EDPB guidelines. EDPB guidelines stands for European Data Protection Board guidelines. So these guidelines are specific to GDPR, but still they are very much useful to get a lot of detailed insights regarding certain topics. And I'll recommend people to use Quizlet app. Quizlet app is there, which is free in internet. There are a lot of people who have created summary of different topics. For example, they would have created short notes, like bullet points of important topics. I'll give an example. What are the six principles of GDPR? Or if I would say, what are the three models of data governance? Right. So similarly, you can actually create your own, but you can refer what has been created in the Quizlet app. So that is also a quick way to keep yourself refreshed. Whenever you get a free time, just open the app, just browse the topics that will keep you updated with it, right? So work as a team, discuss your wrong answer and understand the logic behind it. That is something I always suggest. So working as a team has worked wonders. For example, my current CIPP batch, there are at least 15 people who are going to join the session, right? So 15 people work as a team, like they come back, discuss the questions, understand the logic. If you make a mistake, work as a team. People are coming from very diverse backgrounds, someone from legal, someone from technology, someone from process. So everyone has a different mindset, different logic. So discussing as a team, understanding the questions, understanding the logic makes a lot of wonders. So working as a team is the excellent option to clear such professional certifications. These are the exam resources which I want to suggest to everyone. So you need to purchase something called IAPP official Q&A, which is 90 questions. Unfortunately, this is all which you have from IAPP has at least released this 90 question last year. So when I did my exam, there was only 25 questions available. Okay, at least this is better right now. So 90 question is an exact simulation of your exam, right? So purchase this 90 question, it will be roughly around 4,400 or 500 rupees. All right. This Q&A is definitely recommended and actually much needed because it gives you a simulation of how what you can expect in the actual exam, right? So I highly recommend these two resources. And second is a textbook, sorry, not a textbook, it's a Q&A question bank by author Majid Hateman. So it consists of 180 questions. It is also again a very good resource when it comes to CIPM exam. So the third one is I'll be providing you a 90 question mock exam, right? So you totally have around 360 questions to practice with, which is excellent from where we started at 25 when I gave my exam to where we stand right now. Uh, I don't recommend you to try anything which is available in the internet because they have at least 50 to 60% of wrong answers, and that is the reason I recommend everyone to practice only with the resources which I recommend. Because once you practice with the wrong set, it corrupts your memory, it corrupts your knowledge as well. That's the reason. At least don't look at the answers whichever they provide. If you are not sure, discuss with the WhatsApp group, discuss with the team. That's the reason I always recommend don't practice with random resources. People who have done previous certification exam know the statement whichever I'm making here. You need the right resources to practice with, which is a very very important requirement. All right. So another important point is practice in an exam simulation mode. Don't take 10, 20 questions and just practice just like that. You have 360 questions. You can actually make 4 exam simulation, which is set a clock for 2.5 hours, sit and complete 90 questions, right? So this helps you to understand how much pressure it takes to give this exam. Because when you give the 10 questions, it is quite easy to do those 10 questions at a time. But when you do 90 questions, your brain also gets saturated at a point of time, right? So people who have done previous certification exam, they will be aware of these points. But if you're doing for the first time, you definitely need to know how much saturation it happens at a point of time. It happens to all of us, right? If you are giving around 35, 40 questions, you will realize sometimes you will read the look at the screen, but you will not be able to read anything, right? It happens. And the questions are very very tricky. There is a last word except. So if you miss that word, you're going to make a complete mistake on that question, right? So that is the reason you need to practice in the exam model so that you get used to that pressure mode, right? If you don't do it in the pressure mode, then you will find it really difficult on the exam day, right? So this is another suggestion I usually tell every candidate. So these are the resources which are available in IAPP site: body of knowledge, exam blueprint, and certification candidate handbook. So the handbook gives you details about what are the different models which is available for the exam, which is your self-proctored mode, which you can give it from your home, and second is your giving exam at a center, right? and also they give you do's and don'ts and other stuff which is in the handbook. Exam blueprint gives you the exam weightage in terms of each and every chapter. I'll be showing that in the upcoming slides as well. All right, so this is an exam strategy which I would recommend for everyone. So the exam will test your complete understanding and application of data privacy management. So it may look very superficial or high level when you read the textbook, but the questions are really specific, so you need to have a good solid understanding of what is required. So when you come to my session, I'll make you understand this topic. You can definitely expect an exam question. So this is the way I will make you prepared during the course itself, like what are the different aspects that can be tested in the exam, right? So I found the exam a bit tricky, confusing, and vague at times, which means there are out of 90 questions, there could be few questions will be completely annoying you, or certain questions will not have a proper structuring, or it makes you feel like what I don't understand head and toe of the question. Like that, it is there. The reason is there are questions which are kept for psychometric purposes, or questions which are meant to be really difficult, right? So your objective is to not to score 500. So again, another point is this exam is scored between 100 to 500. The starting score itself is 100 and the maximum score is 500. So you need to score 300 out of 500, which is not the actual arithmetic of 60%. So I generally tell every candidate to target 70 to 75% minimum. Okay, and that is a benchmark to make yourself prepared for the D-Day, right? So when you will realize that this question usually comes from all my candidates, they ask me like, Jay, should I go ahead with the exam date? So I ask the simple question: have you scored 70 to 75% consistently in all the four sets? Please go ahead for the exam. Simple. If you are still behind 70%, look at the logic. Where did you make a mistake? Then try to look at if there is a mistake on reading the question, or there is a lag, or there is a lack of knowledge which you made you mistake, right? So which means you need to go back to the textbook, ensure there is no gap when it comes to the knowledge part, right? So this is something I usually recommend to my candidates. So, and if possible, create an outline from the book and include key points from your different sources. So if you have a habit of pen and paper, which is my style, I'm a bit old school. So when I did my exam, I used to make my own notes. I tried to create, but don't worry, if you come to my session, you will get the PDF of whatever we are discussing during the session. You don't need to take notes during the session, but it is advisable if you create with your own hands what is important, whatever you feel like. So that usually helps you before the exam day, because you will not be having time to go through the entire textbook before the exam day, right? So it helps you to make your own notes. That's something I will suggest, not mandatory, but something it's good to have. So try to read the exam experience from different candidates, right, to get the exam flavor. For example, if you are going through a CIPM study group in Facebook, so this also gives you a bit of flavor, what the exam is testing. The candidates will tell you this is what I referred. So I periodically go through and also discuss with my candidates whoever has cleared the exam to refresh what exactly materials which has worked for them. So I keep updating these slides, and pay attention to the detail. Many answers have similarly worded. Eliminate any answers you know are incorrect first. So out of four options, generally two options are quite easily eliminatable. Between the two options, sometimes is the requirement is to choose the best answer, right? So that is where you need to put your application of eliminating it. Each and every word in the question is important, right? You may read a three-line question, but the last word in the question is what will lead you to the answer. That is the reason you need to be extremely cautious while reading the questions. And don't dwell. If you like you're taking too long in one question, so you need to strategize, like if there are 90 questions and 2.5 hours, you need to strategize how much time I need to spend for every question, right? Not more than a minute and a half. Generally, that is what I would recommend. A minute is more than enough for you to clear the questions. So read the question. If you're spending too much time, then you need to move on. You have the option to flag the questions. So the exam is divided into two parts, which is 45 question is a break time. You can take 15 minutes of break, or you can you can also skip the break as well. You have both options. The 15 minutes is extra for you. 15 minutes you can take the break, and then you can move to the second set. So once you finish the 45 question, then only you will be allowed to enter the second section, which is the next 45 questions, which means first 1 to 45 question, whatever you flag at the end of 45th question, you will be asked to complete those flag question. Send, you have to click complete and then move on to the second section. All right. So this is a good opportunity for you to take that 10 minutes break. Generally go away and not look at the screen, look at something, just take your bio break and then come back. So that's a good option. I always recommend everyone take the break. It's much required, right? And so also there are scenario based questions. Out of 90 questions, at least there are 30-35 questions which will be based on scenarios. Just typically like the paragraph questions, there will be 4 or 5 different paragraph. You have to then answer 3 to 4 questions that follows based on the information provided in the paragraph. So this is a slightly tricky area because there will be too much of information which will be loaded in those paragraph. Lot of unnecessary information, lot of noise which is there in that paragraph questions. So you need to pay attention. A quick strategy I would tell everyone is go through the questions first before reading a long paragraph. So your brain is automatically tuned to check the sections whichever is important, so that you read those sections carefully, right? So this is something which I recommend to everyone. So don't hover over the question which you already correct, which you have marked, right? Don't spend too much time second guessing whatever you have already marked, because it's a human instinct that whenever you read a question properly, the first time whatever you mark, it will be the right answer, right? So don't try to second guess or third guess yourself whether I write whether is that right answer or not, because you will get into an endless loop, right? So there's no time for second guessing. It's a competitive exam, so you need to ensure the time factor is always counted upon. All right. So this is an exam blueprint which is provided by IAPP. So there are 6 sections. The first 2 section is just an introduction to the privacy program, and then the privacy program framework. Then the 4 chapters are about, not 4 chapters, the 4 sections are about the data privacy operation lifecycle, right? So in the data privacy operation lifecycle, you have assess, protect, sustain, and respond. So I think we completed till sustain, or sustain, one more chapter is there. Then we are going to touch upon the response chapter today, right? So this is the exam blueprint. This just gives you a sort of flavor which particular chapters are very important from the exam perspective. All right. So we'll move on to the content, which is your training and awareness is chapter 8. Okay. So in this chapter, it's a very easy chapter in terms of understanding why we need training and awareness, difference between training and awareness, how do we communicate, what are the different channels to communicate, identifying the audience, how to strategize your training, what are the different methods, and how do you apply metrics. Quite easy chapter. So I'm just not going to go into the depth of how do we provide training and stuff, but I just thought to bring a slide which shows you some of the important aspects when it comes to training, right? So the first aspect is data minimization. So data minimization is a very important principle, although it's not there in every law, but it's a law, it's a principle which helps you in a long run to comply with any global laws. Data minimization is collect the minimum data that is necessary for you to achieve the purpose. If you have excess information, you always have a time bomb in your organization. You never know what's going to happen next, right? So whenever you're collecting data from customer, collect only the minimum data that is required. Privacy by design is embedding your strong privacy requirements and controls into product, process, and services at a very early stage, right? So the principles we discussed last time, and access and correction, ensure you provide the data subject rights, make the data subject understand what are the rights available to them, and these things have to be provided in your privacy notice or contracts, and also be mindful of the international data transfer. So these are the important topics which you need to make your employees understand, because employees are the weakest link in your organization, and most probably you will see majority of the data breaches that has occurred in the world as 35% are due to the employees human errors, right? So that is the reason awareness and training is a very integral part. And for example, in the Indian scenario, this is going to take a very huge role in the next 1 or 2 years, because people are not aware about privacy roles and responsibility, the requirements from a law, right? So this part has to be taken at a very high priority for Indian organization. All right. Now, if you look at the different uh, modes which are available for giving the training, how do you strategize this training, right? So you can come up with different models to do the training. It can be classroom based, it can be like whatever we are doing, a remote based training and awareness, right? It can also have the difference between training and awareness as well. Training is giving a proper channel of information and knowledge, and awareness is reinforcing it over a period of time, correct? So you have the different ways to give awareness, which is your targeted emails, and you will also have your in terms of having uh, the signs and symbols, and you will also give some periodic reminders of something like that. And you need to be very innovative as well as practical when it comes to this data privacy trainings, and because you need to understand your threat landscape. If there is a recent breach, then you need to provide that information for the employees and the relevant teams to understand what went wrong and how to correct yourself in the future. Make them understand the policies, procedures, emerging threats and risk, right? And make them understand how to report a data privacy breach, and how to understand their roles and responsibility. And all these things are very very important factor, correct? And you also need to define a metrics and provide those reporting to the top management periodically, because top management's commitment to data privacy trainings are very very important. If there is a push from top management, obviously every employee in the organization are gonna make take it seriously, right? So I'm just gonna jump into some questions so that you get a flavor of it. My intention is not to go deep into each of these topics because we have another two chapters which are essentially more important. So we will jump into the questions now. So in this option is A, through targeted curricula designed for specific department, right? So if there is a consolidated privacy training program, how can it be developed better? Which means there is a common content which is well structured, but how to make it more relevant is to specify the roles and responsibility as per the organization role. For example, someone is working in the marketing department. If you customize the privacy training to the marketing roles and responsibility, for instance, whenever they do an advertisement campaign, how should they collect personal data, what are their do's and don'ts? If you customize as per the department role, then it becomes more relatable to them, and they pay more attention and they take this seriously, right? So answer is A. Question number two. See, a knee jerk reaction is always to immediately implement a solution or a software, right? But if you see, the actual problem statement here is given by one of the word, which is HR staff seems surprised by the records retention policy. Whatever solution you're going to bring, if the staff is not even aware about that particular solution, then what's the point of this data lifecycle management as well, right? So data lifecycle management, yes, that is absolutely will definitely help you. But if the people who are working, they are not even understanding retention requirement, if they are not properly applying those retention requirement, how are you going to solve this problem, right? So the idea is that awareness training has to be the most important critical element first to make them understand there is a retention requirement which the HR needs to implement. If it is not done, then obviously any solution is not going to work out in their favor, right? So answer should be C. Is it clear then? Everyone is able to get the logic. This is how you will get exam questions, right? So exam question, I will give you 90 question simulation. So there will be one dedicated session to discuss wherever you made a mistake. I will run you through the logic of why this is the right answer. This is the way you actually learn to clear this exam. Otherwise, the exam topics are pretty easy, but exam question is what makes it really difficult, and you need to go through the logic. All right. Okay, so going through the next chapter, which is data subject rights. So data subject rights, when we speak about data subject right, this is actually core requirement of any data privacy law in the world, right? So data privacy laws have provide different sort of data subject rights to different jurisdictions, right? In India, currently we have four data subject rights, which is right to confirmation or right to access we can call, or then right to rectification, right to erasure, right to grievance, and right to nominate. When you go to GDPR, we have 6 to 7 different data subject rights. So each country, each law provides a different set of data subject rights. But basically, you get these three data subject rights, which are quite common in any of the law, which is right to access and confirmation, which means you need to provide a response to the data subject whether you are having their personal data or not. Then, if you confirm that, you need to provide a copy of that personal data, right? This is a very common data subject right, which is there in many of the data privacy laws. Second is right to rectification, right? Whenever a data subject approaches you to make some correction to the to their personal data, then you need to have those channels to do such corrections. And third is in terms of ensuring your accuracy of the personal data, right? So rectification accuracy goes hand in hand. And if someone wants to delete the data, sorry, third will be deletion of data. If someone requests the controller to delete the data, you cannot immediately delete the data. At the same time, you need to look at balancing aspects such as the legal regulatory requirements. Whether the request is valid, then only you can delete the data. So just giving you an overview. In this chapter, there is a lot of content related to the privacy notices, because you need to know privacy notice as a very important say in terms of communicating the data subject rights to the people, right? So if they are not even aware about the rights, they will not going to be exercising. So that is why the law mandates that you need to communicate what are the different rights which are available for the data subject, and it's a very mandatory requirement. You need to make them communicate this whenever collecting the personal data, at the time or before collecting the personal data, right? So, and also how do you handle children consent, and what are the different requirements across the world when it comes to children's personal data handling, how to respond to the data subject rights. So if right now when you see information security, you have different domains which are coming out, right? So for example, identity access management, process side, there are different technological controls. There is a sim, which is like SOC monitoring is a different section. Likewise, in data privacy, going forward, you will see separate departments or separate sub functions which will come out. One such important function will be data subject rights management. The reason is, in a country of the population which we have, if people start making those data subject requests, then we need a dedicated department to handle this, right? So you need to create those procedures. There is a lot of process involved in this as well, right? I'll explain them in the coming slides. First, to make you understand what are the different data subject rights which are available, which is right to be informed, which I told you in terms of getting a confirmation or getting an access to the data in a readable format, and right to so right to access and right to be informed together is what I explained. Right to correction is making changes to the personal data. Right to deletion is, for example, if you feel your personal data has been collected by a third party, you have not authorized that, you can ask for the data to be deleted. Or if the purpose of the processing has completed, then also you can request the data to be deleted. So whenever comes to the data erasure, data deletion request, it has to be balanced. Okay, what was the lawful basis for which the data was collected, right? Not all the requests will be fulfilled in certain cases. You need to look at certain checks and balances. That is why this particular topic is a very sensitive area. And if you fail to actually implement this data subject rights, again it's you will get a penalty from the supervisory authority, right? That is the reason it's a very sensitive and important area for organization to look out. If you want to start your data privacy program, the very important area that is going to be focused is your data subject rights management. Right to temporarily suspension of processing, which is called right to restriction. For example, if there is an accuracy is contested, right, the personal data whatever the company is having, there is an accuracy issue in that data, right? So what needs to be done in that case is that the data has to be kept on hold. There should not be any further processing should be done. Or if there is a request for deletion of the data and there is no decision taken yet, in these cases the processing should be kept on hold. So that is called a temporary suspension of processing. This is a GDPR specific right. And right to object is whenever you are processing personal data based on legitimate interest or public interest or for direct marketing purposes. In those cases, every data subject has the right to object such processing. So you need to actually prove that your legitimate interest overpowers the rights and freedom of data subject. So this is why it's a very tricky area whenever you are using your lawful basis for legitimate interest, and you need to have proper documentation. When I say documentation, there is a test which is called legitimate impact assessment test. Along with that, in that you need to capture your necessity and proportionality and adequacy aspect as well. So these things we will be discussing in our sessions in detail. Right to portability is a very interesting right, which means, for example, tomorrow I go for an insurance company, I fill my KYC form. After 1 year, I want to change my insurance company. Let's take a motor insurance. I want to change my insurance player to a different vendor, right? In that case, what you can do is ask the company A to transfer my KYC information to company B directly. So you don't need to create one more digital footprint of your personal data. So this is a very interesting right. Unfortunately, in the Indian version, we don't have this right. This is available in GDPR. The next one is right in relation to automated decision making. So what is automated decision making? Whenever a computer makes a decision, when I say computer, it's a system. For example, it's an artificial intelligence driven system or a machine learning driven system. So what essentially happens is when you go and apply for a credit card or for a loan, banks have started using those automated system which gives you a percentage score. For example, yeah, based on your parameters which has been inputted in the artificial intelligence system, they will come to a 90% confidence score or 50% confidence score. So they will, based on this output, they will decide whether to give a loan or a credit card to a particular customer. So I'm just giving an example. This is called automated decision making. So in GDPR region, so you need to inform to the data subject that there is a automated decision making involved in the process for which we collect your personal data. So the data subject has a right when it comes to GDPR to say no, that I'm not agreeing to such automated decision making. All right. So this is again a specific GDPR based law. So these are different types of rights which are available. It varies from regulation to regulation. As I told, in India, we will have four different rights. Okay, so this is a quick overview of how a data subject rights management generally happens. For example, when you receive a request, there are different channels you can receive a request. It can come from Twitter, it can come from online social media, it can come from your mobile phones, email, it can come from your company's website portal. There's a lot of channels through which you can receive your complaint or data subject rights. So you need to identify different channels. You need to have teams who will monitor these sources wherever you can receive a request, right? For example, there is a person John, who is making a request for data erasure, right? So whenever John makes a request, you need to first confirm that the person that you have received this request, right? And once you confirm that we have received this request from John, you need to update the concern database, and finally compile the list of relevant data, right? So in this path, there is one important criteria to identify John is actually John, right? You need to identify the person, you need to validate the data subject before confirming the request, right? So this is what happens in the confirmation part. So confirmation part, which means you can ask him to prove you are John. How they can do it? For example, if you are already an associated customer, you can ask them to send via the official email ID, or you can ask them to there is different ways challenge and response mechanism can be created to validate a person, right? So do not try to ask excess information. For example, to validate the person, don't ask them to give their passport, right, which you are not collected earlier. If you have collected certain data to prove that, you can ask them to confirm that. For instance, if you have done some authentication based on Aadhaar card or any other data, you can ask them to say the last or four digit, or maybe if you already have their date of birth, or if you have, you can send an email link to their official email ID, ask them to confirm that link. So there is many ways to make such authentication. And then if someone asks you to erase the data, make the list of relevant data. You need to look at different system which holds the data, and check whether the data can be erased. This is a very important step, because I told you not every data is erasable. There are certain legal and regulatory requirements. Classical example is employees data. Employees data, all the data cannot be deleted. There are data needs to be kept for a period of 7 years, 10 years, which comes from a legal requirement, right? So in that cases, you need to inform you cannot delete this data. Otherwise, you can execute an erasure, which can be automated or manual also as well. So you need to also inform the third parties which also receive this data from you. For instance, you are outsourcing your HRMS function, right? So in that case, the data is also going to the HRMS vendor. So that in that case also, the data has to be deleted from there end as well. So then confirmation of erasure of the data subject. Otherwise, if you cannot fulfill that, you also need to inform the John Doe about that we cannot delete your data, right? If there is an exemption, you need to notify the exemption as well. So this is how a typical process works when it comes to a data erasure request. All right. So can we discuss few questions? We have one more chapter to cover. We'll quickly discuss on the questions. Anil, right to duplicate. I don't know what is right to duplicate. There is no such data subject rights available. So if you receive such a request, what should you do? You should not do a knee-jerk response of deleting all the data, right? Uh, you would look at option 4, remove or anonymize the data subject personal information as permitted by the law, right? You have two options, which is anonymization. Anonymization is removing all the personally identifiable aspect of a data. If for example, my name is Jendra Kumar, and my salary information, all these information are available, right? The moment you remove all the personally identifiable feature like my name, or an associated date of birth, my address, my email ID, all these things are removed, then that data doesn't actually come into the category of personal data, right? So that is what we call it as anonymization. So organization has these two options: either anonymous data or remove the data as permitted by the law. So this is a very important check, that you need to balance the legal requirements along with the data subject rights. Okay, answer is D. So we'll move on to the last chapter. Okay, pseudonymization still leaves the data within the scope of GDPR. 100% yes, Mary. GDPR suggests organization to do pseudonymization. Pseudonymization is a temporary. For example, you remove the identifiers. Uh, Actually, you isolate the identifiers in a different place, which means at any point of time you can actually reconstruct the database, right? So anonymization is permanently trying to remove the identifiers. All right, so that is the difference between anonymization and pseudonymization. But pseudonymous data is still applicable as per GDPR. The reason is you are just temporarily removing the identifiers and isolating it. Right, you always have the ability. Maybe in the organization, very few people will have the ability to know where is the connecting link, and they can reconstruct the data whenever required. Right, so that is the reason pseudonymous data is still applicable within GDPR. All right. So this is about your training and awareness, not sorry, data subject rights chapter. We're going to move into the last chapter, which is the data breach incident response chapter. So in the operational life cycle, this is going to be the last two chapters, which is data subject rights and incident response, will be the response phase. Okay, which is the last phase. Hope Mary that answers your question. So we'll go to the incident response. Incident response is again a very critical area. So many organizations actually have a very good information security response, but what they fail is that they don't understand the nuances required for a data privacy breach management. Because when there is a breach in information security, you rarely report to the authorities, correct? But nowadays, even the certains, which is like emergency response team of the central governments or your national authorities, are also asking you if there is a significant exposure or threat to the country itself, then you need to report such breach. But majority breaches are never reported from when it comes to information security. But whereas when it comes to data privacy breaches, it's a very different ball game, because you need to report to the authorities as well as to the data subject as well, and there is a stipulated time. For example, in GDPR, the time to respond, time to notify a supervisory authority is 72 hours, which means the 72 hours you don't have the time to decide, but rather you need to do a lot of assessment. Before you go to an authority, they will ask you set of questions. For example, what was the root cause? What is going to be the impact on the data subject? What are the controls you have implemented to reduce the damage on the data subject? So if you have the 72 hours to do all these assessments before going to the supervisory authority. Similarly, in GDPR, you have these two conditions: when to notify a supervisory authority, when to notify a data subject. Right. So I think those things. I have a slide if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So for example, you for the supervisory authority, you have this 72 hours cutoff time, right? So within that time you would assess what is the criteria to notify a supervisory authority. It's very simple. If there is a risk to the data subject, right, then you need to notify the supervisory authority. And when to notify a data subject? When there's a high risk to the data subject. What is the difference between risk and high risk? For example, uh, when there is a breach of a personal data, but there are sufficient mitigation controls. Those mitigation controls enables you to reduce the damage significantly, that it doesn't materialize to a high risk. So this is the reason we don't inform the data subject in those cases. A classical example is, for example, if you have a encrypted laptop or encrypted pen drive is getting lost by one of your employees during transition or whenever is coming to office. In that case, you don't even need to inform a data protection authority. The reason is your laptop and everything is generally end-to-end encrypted, right? At least for the pen drive, it's quite risky nowadays. But for the laptop, you also have an MDM solution which enables you to remotely wipe the laptop completely, right? So there is significantly very less risk. So there's not even a need to inform the data protection authority in that case. So when you go to the data protection authority, you need to fulfill all these elements which I told you: number of data subjects who are exposed, what are the categories of the data which is getting breached, what are the measures taken, what are the consequence of the breach, and if it's in a high risk to the data subject. For example, if the data involves financial data, or if it involves a sensitive personal data, like your political affiliation, or if it is about your genetic information or your health information, all these things are very sensitive in nature, right? So in those cases, there is a material damage which is quite possible. That's the reason you need to inform the data subject. The intent of informing a data subject is to make them prepare for unforced event, so that they can minimize the damage as much as possible, right? So this is about that entire passage of notification. Again, this varies from country to country, from the law to law. GDPR gives the cutoff time 72 hours. For the Indian TPDP Act, there is no such timeline. It says that the moment you are aware of the breach, you have to inform, right? So we are expecting some further guidelines to come on this particular aspect. Eventually we will see some more detailed instruction will come into this particular topic, right? So that is about your breach notification aspect. Generally, what is the components of your incident response plan? You need to have a proper team. You need to train them. You need to have incident response contact sheet in terms of who are the people, what are the authorities. There are different escalation levels. So whenever there is a suspecting or detecting incident, you need to have a triage. Triage is generally in terms of actually dividing your incidents into different categories, right? So the moment you know there is a high risk possible incident, you need to alert the concerned team, and you take an appropriate remedial step as well. And incident response discovery form, you need to create so those templates, incident assessment and analysis, breach response flow charts, notification to the relevant authorities, stakeholders, uh, uh, customer employee notice consent. If there is a notice has to be provided, you need to update you have those templates ready. And if there's a notification letter that needs to be sent in case of a breach to the data subject, and also some additional policies and procedures. This is just an overview. It's not the de facto incident response plan, but generally these are some of the important components that should be part of your incident response plan, right? So these are the topics, but I'm not covered all the topics. This is a very important chapter actually. There's a lot of depth into this. I'm just trying to highlight an overview of some of the important topics that will be covered in the sessions, right? So with that, I'm just jumping to the Q&A. After this, I think there is a couple of more things to be there. Good question, AK. An organization privacy officer was just notified by the benefits manager that she unfairly sent out the retirement. So what should the privacy officer should do in this case? Knee-jerk reactions are sending a firm-wide email notification to the employees, contact the recipients to delete the email, report the incident to the law enforcement, perform an impact assessment. So most of you got it right. I think answer is A. Without doing an impact assessment, you cannot jump to any conclusion. That is the reason you get those 72 hours, right? Within the 72 hours, you need to understand what exactly is the breach is about. Then only you can send notification, send the contact to delete, and all these things, right? You don't jump into a conclusion before doing an assessment. So answer is A. What is business resiliency? All right. So answer to this question is B. Nothing much to explain here. Let's go to the next question. Under GDPR, which of the following situation would most likely to require a controller to notify a data subject? I told you the scenario is a high risk. Whenever it's a high risk, then you need to notify a data subject. So to the answer to the question is A. The moment it's a encrypted USB, actually the data cannot be attributed to the person, right? So it is less likely to cause a damage to the data subject. So answer is A. When you go to B, C, and D, definitely all these events is definitely going to have an impact on the data subject. Direct marketing email is sent to with recipients with visible in CC, which is definitely a sort of thing which is not acceptable in GDPR. It's a direct breach. You need to inform the data subject that your information was leaked to so many people. The third is data of groups of individuals is erroneously sent to the wrong mailing list. Again, this is also something which you need to notify. The fourth is hacker publishing usernames, phone numbers, and purchase history after a cyber attack. Again, this also will require you to do a notification. All right. So B, C, and D all will likely to notify the data subject. Answer is A because it is unlikely because it's an encrypted AK. Okay. Let's go to the next question. Surprised. Most of you are getting it right. So whenever there's a data breach, they have to inform the data controller, not to the data protection authority, because they are bound by the contractual terms and conditions. It's the responsibility to inform the data controller, and the data controller will take the call whether to notify the supervisory authority or not. Okay. So notification is not a responsibility of the processor, it is always a responsibility of the data controller. So that actually winds up in terms of content whatever I had to discuss with you. I'm just trying to give you a glimpse of what different aspects of the training and questions. All right, so I will have a different set of 90 questions when you come to my session. and those questions are definitely much more difficult. I don't want you to walk down with difficult question at this point of time. The reason is I'm not given you the content and training in depth. Right? It's not fair to expect you to answer those questions without the appropriate knowledge, right? So that's the reason I've kept fairly simple questions. But when you join my session, you will get those 90 questions. It's going to be a bit exam mode or equivalent to the exam simulation part, right? Is it possible for the EU authorities to impose fines on data processor? Absolutely yes, Prashant, because processor have their separate obligation defined in GDPR. So if you fail on those counts, definitely processor is going to sue you. Second, you will also get the lawsuit from the controller also. If the processor is making a mistake, you will get penalty from the authorities. Also, the controller will also take you to the court and sue you because you have violated the terms and conditions of the contract, right? So that is why you need to be extremely careful about it. All right. So I wanted to show you some interview questions when it comes to data privacy. Just an indicative list, right? What is the difference between privacy and information security? We discussed this in the session already. Difference between personal data, sensitive personal data, and personally identifiable information. So sensitive data and PII are a subset of personal data. Sensitive is a special category data which denotes that if these category data are breached, it will have a big impact on the data subject. Personally identifiable information is a set of personal data that explicitly identifies a data. For example, a person like your passport number, your PAN card, your Aadhaar card, your phone numbers, your email IDs. All these are PII because they explicitly and uniquely identify a person. Right? When I say email ID, your personal email ID, not your official one. Even official one, for example, it denotes a person, then it will also qualify as a PII. Difference between anonymization and pseudonymization, I also explained it sometime before. When you remove the personal identifiable information from it and permanently ensure that the data cannot be reconstructed, then it becomes anonymization. You temporarily isolate the PII and keep it in a different place, that becomes your pseudonymization. Difference between a regulation and directive: in GDPR we call it as a regulation, and there are also directives which applies on a member state level. This is a CIPP focus question. What are GDPR rights which are available to data subject? I think we discussed that there are 6 to 7 rights which are available. Questions can come in terms of how do you balance it. Can you fulfill all the rights at every point of time? Answer is no. You need to balance your legal requirement as well. Do all companies have to designate DPO? Answer is no. Only when there are cases, for example, defined by the law, then only there are triggers in GDPR. If you fit into that trigger, then only you need to fulfill the DPO obligation. What are the GDPR violation that attracts maximum penalty? There are two slabs when it comes to GDPR penalty, which is 2% or 10 million euros or 20 million euros, 4% of global annual turnover. So maximum penalty is generally towards the core violation. For example, you violate the principles of GDPR, violate the data subject rights, violate international data transfer, right? So if you do violation on these counts, then you will attract the maximum penalty. What is the time limit for complying data subject request? 30 calendar days is what you get in GDPR, and you will also get an additional 2 months for a complex request. So, what is the time limit for informing authorities? 72 hours. And what is the condition? If there is a risk to the data subject, you need to inform the supervisory authority, and if it's a high risk, you need to inform the supervisory authority. Sorry, the data subject. What are the available international data transfer instruments? We discussed this in the chapter. There are three different instruments which are available. The first is the adequacy decision. Second is the safeguards, which includes standard contractual clauses, your ad hoc contracts, your binding corporate rules and certification. And finally, you get exemptions or derogations, which is your explicit consent, contract, and public interest. And finally, what type of data lies beyond the scope of GDPR? Anonymous data, aggregated data, all these data are beyond of GDPR regulation, which means these data are not personal data basically, right? What is layered data privacy notice? So this is a technology, not technology. It's a process by which you actually make your detailed privacy notice much more crisper and it is easy to comprehend. You divide the privacy notice content into some important section, 2 3 layers. The first layer will be the most important information and provides subsequent links to contact go through the next set of layers, right? So this is called layered privacy notice, right?